Hi, we've just been speaking to Claire Fox, Baroness Fox here, and she's just got a couple of minutes left to share with you some of our own exclusive questions. Well, I've got one actually, Claire. That is, you've been in the Lords now for 2 years.
Yeah.
2 years. You were weren't you anti? You were anti-hospital. Are you still anti? Are you more anti or less anti now?
More anti.
Really? Okay.
I didn't understand it before, so in as much as I now understand its role in terms of creating legislation, but I don't think an unelected chamber should do that. And I've always thought that an unelected second chamber is an affront to democracy. So people, you can imagine when I got asked to do it, you could say, well, why did you say yes? And I had to think, God, I was in turmoil. I didn't know what to do. But when I did say yes, thinking it might be a platform that I could make some of the points that I feel passionately about, I knew that I could have the term hypocrite thrown at me a lot. And I just decided, well, I'll have to live with that and see whether I can make it a useful experience. Why I continue to be anti is because I thought the one thing that I find in the Lords was a lot of independent-minded people. There's lots of caricatures about the Lords that they're all old and they're all half asleep and they only go in for the money. A lot of that's actually not true or not fair. But there was also this idea that it's full of wise heads who run things and that is, I've been very disappointed at how little of that there is. It's party politics, party whips. There are some very impressive politicians of a generation that we don't see anymore. That's true. I really listen to some speeches and think they're wonderful. But so often I listen to speeches and they're like cut and paste versions of a press release put out by the party office, So it's dull.
Yes. Well, also, I would have thought that if you'd been there in the absolute, the height of the whole Brexit maelstrom, that might have been very demoralising. Because, for many people, the Lords became public enemy number one, didn't they, during that period?
Well, yeah. And there are people who still got the scars, Brexiteers in the Lords who still got the scars. And I think that really it was a very toxic atmosphere in there of the minority of Brexiteers. There's obviously a few more leavers now. That was, I suppose, Boris's legacy was to bring in people like me and Kate Hoey and Geezer Stewart, and there's a clutch for more. The Brexit wars are still going on in the House of Lords, by the way, and one of the difficulties I had when I got in was that I sit behind the Labour benches. That's where a lot of the non-affiliated. That's where Kate Hoey and I both sit. It's not that we're in the Labour benches, but we sit behind them. And they actually physically tried to bully us off the benches. It's completely unparliamentary. Certainly not peers welcomes. And they tried to get rid of, go, you shouldn't be here, go, and all this sort of stuff went on. And that was from kind of hard Remainers who absolutely hated us. But and we just discussed the Windsor framework yesterday. When I say discussed, I think 14, we forced a vote and 14 of us voted against the framework. 230 voted for it. Lots of abstentions from the Tory benches, I'm glad to see.
You actually put quite a bit on Twitter, don't you?
Yeah.
In the Lords.
Well, that's rather pathetic. When I went in, when I went into the Lords, I had this sort of notion that I should go public with everything. So I said, right, I'm going to do a weekly Inside the Lords vlog or whatever, little film. So I do that every week, saying what's happened in Parliament and trying to explain what the House of Lords does. And I also put all my speeches up. But of course, I didn't really know I was going to be doing so many speeches. It looks a bit vain, really, because I'm forever putting speeches up. But anyway, I said I'm going to make everything I do public, as though I've got it. I know I haven't got any voters, but I'll try and make the inner workings of this secret place known to you. Actually, I think more people should pay attention to the Lords. I've indicated in our earlier interview that it was the Lords that changed the higher education bill. Too often, and I understand this, everyone's looking at the Commons, but what the government has done, especially with the big majority, is it rushes things through the Commons and they all got changed in the Lords. The government likes to then blame the unelected Lords for changing things. Let me tell you, the government uses the Lords to compromise. A bit like they use the EU. It's not our fault, you know. You know. So they basically say, "Oh well, no, we had to change it because the Lords made us." Well, no, that's not true. The Lords didn't make anything at all. The bit that's been fascinating is realising how terrible we are at writing legislation as a country.
Right.
I think we've basically lost. I think because the UK was in the EU for so long, we've lost the habit of lawmaking directly. The basically largely ruling the UK in the past was getting European law and learning how to interpret it in a UK context.
Yes.
Writing your own laws, having to really legislate, knowing how to rule a country is not a habit that we've quite acquired yet. And so a lot of the legislation that's coming through is either unnecessary, it's got all sorts of unintended consequences. Government ministers don't realise what the bills officers sneaked through. You know, that you'll say to them, well, this section would mean this. And you look at the minister and you think, you don't know that's what it would mean, right? They don't understand their own legislation.
Well, Claire, one more question. You mentioned there about not being in favour of a hereditary chamber.
Oh, yeah.
We've got a coronation coming up. Are you a Republican?
Oh, I'm a total Republican. But, I'm not in favour of an unelected chamber. I would like to point out that I defend the hereditary peers in the House of Lords because there's nothing that the Labour and Lib Dem benches like better than having a go at the hereditary peers in the House of Lords. And I say, well, we're no more legitimate than they are. Yeah. I mean, at least they've got a bit of history on their side. We were just appointed.
Yes.
You know, all of us were appointed in some arbitrary fashion, so get over yourselves. I'm totally a Republican, but I think the least challenging, the least important challenge to democracy in this country is the royal family at the moment. So I don't care. I'm indifferent. My criticisms of Prince Charles are the usual ones, more about his politics. But as a royal family, I hope the coronation goes as well as anyone can expect it to go. I'm more worried about his modernising tendencies than royalty per se.
Right, well, you won't be having a street party then.
No, but it's always the case that you should note that I am a citizen, not a subject.
Okay. Well, Citizen Fox, thank you very, very much. That's Claire Fox, and hope you enjoyed it.